On a silent, profound night where stars seemed to shine with unusual intensity, an ancient story began to echo from the shadows of the past. Our vast planet holds mysteries that defy human comprehension. One such mystery involves beings known as the Nephilim. What are they? Where did they come from? Could they be mere legends, or is there a truth hidden beneath time's layers? As we contemplate these questions, we are invited to delve into a universe of speculation and curiosity. Imagine an artifact unearthed during excavation, something that shouldn't exist. An object that, upon analysis, reveals technologies defying the known laws of physics. Its weight is incomprehensible, its shape unusual. From a forgotten era when humanity was taking its first steps. The question is, how do these beings, the Nephilim, fit into this scenario? Many cultures worldwide tell stories of giants, beings of immeasurable strength who walked among us. We hesitate to ignore these reports, as they are more than folklore. They are echoes of a reality that may have been. In this nocturnal universe of mysteries, the quest for truth is guided by a narrator who walks beside us, whispering about ancient texts that speak of these enigmatic beings, the sons of God and the daughters of men. What do these texts truly mean? As night deepens, we are led to a distant valley, where the gentle breeze carries the scent of damp earth and leaves whisper forgotten tales. Our senses sharpen, vision becomes clearer in the darkness. The winds touch on the skin, the distant sound of a flowing stream. In this valley, the temperature is mild, a relief for those seeking comfort and clarity amidst modern chaos. The mind relaxes, daily tensions dissipating, allowing imagination to flow freely. It is an invitation to explore, to question, to dream. Imagine yourself beneath an ancient tree, its long roots grasping the earth's essence. Time here seems to slow, and worries dissolve like morning mist. Our community unites those seeking a space to share reflections and concerns. This refuge hears every voice and values every thought. We're encouraged to comment, interact, not just with the story, but with each other. The feeling of belonging is palpable, like a warm blanket enveloping us during the cold night. And as we delve deeper into this quest, we feel the gravity of knowledge pulling us downward, as if the earth itself is calling to us. Thoughts find comfortable space, urgency's pressure dissolving. No rush, only present tranquility, allowing surrender to what lies ahead. The mystery of the Nephilim begins to reveal itself as an enigma intertwined with layers of history and speculation. Known from Genesis, these beings were described as giants, men of renown and power. But what does that truly mean? They represent an intersection of the divine and the human, a bridge between worlds that perhaps should never have met. The sacred text mentions their union, sons of God and daughters of men, an act that some interpret led to an era of violence and corruption. The sacred text mentions that they were the result of the union between the sons of God and the daughters of men, an act that, according to some interpretations, led to an era of violence and corruption. As our minds expand, we question the impact these beings might have had on our history. Were the Nephilim mere myths, or do their imprints still remain in humanity's collective memory? Reports of giants and powerful beings are spread across various cultures, from the ancient Sumerians to the Native Americans. Each story, a piece of a puzzle that refuses to fit perfectly, but which, together, can guide us to a deeper truth. Now, as night advances, and we allow ourselves to relax even more, our thoughts become clearer. What could these Nephilim be, if not a reflection of human aspirations and fears? They can be seen as symbols of strength, protection, or even as warnings about the dangers of limitless power. As we delve deeper into this reflection, we are led to ponder what this means for us today. The valley around us, with its beautiful serenity, reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge is often a solitary path, yet also filled with unexpected companions. Men and women throughout history have sought to understand our place in the universe, and the Nephilim are just one of many questions that arise amidst this quest. Human curiosity must never be underestimated. It is the flame that ignites the desire to comprehend. At this moment, as the night continues, we are reminded that there is more to discover. Every shadow cast on the walls of the surrounding mountains seems to whisper secrets waiting to be heard. The journey is just beginning, and the next step will lead us deeper into a world where the real and the speculative intertwine, where truths hide behind veils of history and myth. In this safe space, we are invited to slow down. We are not just hearing a story, we are becoming part of it. As we allow ourselves to be carried by the flow, we are immersed in a world where questions have no easy answers, but where the act of asking becomes the very essence of our exploration. What do you feel when you think about the Nephilim? What truths might they reveal about ourselves and about what it means to be human? As night advances and mysteries accumulate, we are guided by the light of curiosity and imagination, ready to discover what lies beyond the next bend. And so, the story of the Nephilim unfolds, not as a fairy tale, but as a quest for understanding in a vast universe full of possibilities. The path ahead is uncertain, but that is what makes the journey so fascinating. Prepare yourself, for the true adventure is just beginning. The gentle breeze passing through the valley seemed to carry with it the echoes of a distant time, a time when the stories of the Nephilim were told around campfires, enveloped in mystery and fascination. As we walk through this immersive space, the night becomes a perfect backdrop to reflect on the duality this narrative offers. The Nephilim, mentioned in ancient texts, are often described as giants, beings who walked among men, inspiring both admiration and fear. But who were they really? What do their stories teach us about humanity and its search for meaning? Giants, beings who walked among men, inspiring both awe and fear. But who were they? What do their stories teach us about humanity and its search for meaning? Tales of the Nephilim are not confined to a single place or culture. Diverse civilizations integrated them into mythologies. From ancient giant legends to indigenous tales, the idea of immense, superhuman beings is constant. Their architecture reveals a pattern transcending time and space. These beings, seen as mediators between heaven and earth, were not just characters, but representations of fears, hopes, and the eternal quest for truth. Delving deeper, we find the earliest account in Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1 to 4. There, we find the intriguing mention of the sons of God and the daughters of men, from whose interaction the Nephilim emerge. The idea of these beings from a human-divine union raises questions about humanity's nature. What does this mean for us? This blend of divine, human, celestial, and earthly suggests the Nephilim story is more than giants. It's a reflection on the human condition.
Our narrator's soft voice, resonating in darkness, invites pondering this union's implications. What did they represent to ancient peoples? Were they a warning of boundaries not to cross, or a symbol of unexplored potential? This palpable tension leads us to question our place in the universe. As night progresses, the air's humidity intensifies, and the valley's mild temperature envelops us. Here we relax, leaving world tensions behind. The stream's gentle sound flows beside us, creating a tranquil symphony, sinking us to nature. Wet earth scent blends with soft vegetation, nocturnal sounds becoming a mesmerizing melody. Now imagine Mount Hermon, a mountain of significance where many believe the Watchers descended to Earth. At 2,814 meters high, this majestic formation is not just a landmark, but a symbol of encounters and revelations. Its proximity to sacred sites like Baalbek, with impressive megalithic structures, suggests this ground witnessed extraordinary events. The question persists: what truly happened here? Legends speak of 200 Watchers who descended from the heavens, a group of angels who transgressed by uniting with the daughters of men. What motivated this descent? Human curiosity, desire to learn, or a darker intent? Known for their power, these beings brought not only prowess, but a legacy of teachings, some traditions say, imparted to humanity. Metallurgy, enchantments, astrology, knowledge that brought chaos and destruction. Reflecting, another question arises. What is our responsibility concerning knowledge? What do we do with revealed truths? In this valley, tranquility allows contemplation of these doubts, making the journey more than Nephilim exploration, but a quest for self-understanding and our role in the cosmos. Our very existence allows us to contemplate these doubts, transforming the journey into more than a simple exploration of the Nephilim. It becomes a quest for understanding ourselves and our place in the cosmos. As we continue our journey, the darkness grows denser, yet we do not fear. Instead, we feel drawn to this mystery, as if compelled to seek the truth that resides in the shadows. We hear the whisper of the leaves, which seem to tell their own stories, tales of a time when the sacred and the profane coexisted in ways we can barely imagine. Imagination takes us even further, and we visualize the Nephilim not merely as beings of great stature, but as symbols of an era when humanity was closer to the divine.
They became icons of a time when the world was filled with wonders, and the line between reality and myth was thin. What could they teach us about human ambition, about the boundaries we frequently cross in pursuit of power and knowledge? In this sacred space, where the night breeze brings a sense of peace, we are reminded that the quest for truth is an unending journey. The echoes of the Nephilim stories resonate in our hearts, inviting us to open our minds to the possibilities. As the night advances, we are enveloped by a strange serenity, a conviction that there is more to be revealed, not only about the Nephilim, but about ourselves and the legacy we wish to leave for future generations. Finally, as we prepare for the next stage of this journey, we are guided by a comforting certainty. The quest to understand the Nephilim and what they represent is, ultimately, a search for an understanding of our own humanity. In darkness, we find light, and in uncertainty, we find hope. May the stories we hear today accompany us on our own journeys, always reminding us that while knowledge can challenge us, it also has the power to liberate us. In this valley, where history and myth intertwine in an almost palpable way, shadows dance slowly along the rocks, and the stars seem to lean in, as if listening to every word whispered by the wind. The murmur of nearby waters complements this ambiance, creating a gentle symphony that lulls the mind into a state of tranquility. As we settle into this serene space, we are led to consider the narratives that surround us. The Nephilim, mentioned in ancient texts, are described as giants, beings who possessed strength and power beyond human comprehension. The passage in Genesis relates that they arose when the sons of God united with the daughters of men. What does this truly mean? What are the implications of these words, written millennia ago? Through the mists of history, these beings are portrayed as feared and revered figures, but also as symbols of an era where limits seemed not to exist. The echoes of this still reverberate across various cultures around the world. In every corner, there are stories that speak of immense beings, often described as gods or heroes. In Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki, for example, are frequently associated with themes of creation and power. Could these accounts, like the Nephilim, be fragments of a truth long buried beneath the sands of time? It is an invitation to reflection, to the search for connections between facts and legends. V4 and power. Could these accounts, much like the Nephilim themselves, be fragments of a truth long buried beneath the sands of time? It is an invitation to reflection, to seek connections between facts and legends. In this silent valley, the mind allows itself to wander, like a bird searching for new horizons. And as it does, an unsettling thought begins to form. What if the Nephilim are not merely creatures from a distant past? What if they represent a stage of evolution, an amalgam of humans and celestial beings, an attempt to achieve something beyond what the human condition can offer? The idea that they could be a symbol of a possible future, a representation of our aspirations and fears, begins to take shape. What could have happened in that era when they existed? The imagination floats freely, evoking images of great civilizations, advanced technology, and knowledge that somehow was lost. What remains then are fragments of stories, memories that transformed into myths, a tapestry of narratives speaking of fall and redemption. And so, as the stars continue to shine brightly above us, we look up and ask, what is the true story behind the Nephilim? The night advances softly, and the cold begins to settle in, bringing a new layer of sensation. The air, now fresher, is a reminder of the passage of time. Here, in this liminal space between the real and the imaginary, we are invited to connect with something greater than ourselves. The leaves of the trees seem to whisper ancient secrets, and the mind, now more tranquil, captures these whispers as echoes of a forgotten past. Feeling the ambient temperature, gravity gently pulls us towards the earth, as if encouraging us to anchor ourselves, to connect with the history that surrounds us. We can hear the soft sound of a passing wind, almost like a collective breath of nature. This atmosphere invites us to relax even more, to allow tensions to dissipate like mist at dawn. In this state of calm, we begin to imagine what the life of the Nephilim might have been like. Were they benevolent beings seeking to share knowledge with humanity? Or, on the contrary, were they figures of oppression and danger? Narratives offer us clues, but often they are contradictory. The Book of Enoch, for example, provides a deeper look into these beings.
It tells us of the Watchers, angels who descended to earth and united with mortals, bringing with them skills and knowledge that would shape the destiny of civilizations. This apocryphal text is shrouded in mystery and controversy. While many consider it a work of fiction, others view it as a source of truth that was marginalized throughout the centuries. The figure of Semyaza, the leader of the Watchers, and his interactions with humans offer us a narrative rich in symbolism. The knowledge he and his companions brought, from metallurgy to sorcery, suggests a complex exchange between the divine and the mortal, a power play that still echoes in the stories we tell. Amidst these reflections, the moonlight begins to shine more intensely, casting long, deep shadows upon the ground. It is as if the sky itself is watching our search for answers. The stars, silent witnesses to past eras, seem to encourage us to continue our questioning. The ground below, it is as if the very sky itself is intently watching our search for answers. The stars, silent witnesses of countless past ages, seem to gently encourage us to continue our questioning. As the mind wanders, another compelling idea emerges. What if the Nephilim were merely a profound reflection of what we might ultimately become? If they represent not just a lost past, but also a potent future, the very culmination of the profound union between the human and the divine. As night advances, this possibility becomes increasingly intriguing, and we find ourselves ever more deeply immersed in the quest to understand not only the Nephilim, but also what they can teach us about ourselves. The valley, with its atmosphere heavily laden with ancient mystery, is the perfect place for this profound investigation. The majestic trees around us, with their deep roots firmly planted in the earth and their towering canopies touching the sky, serve as a constant reminder of the inherent connection between the human and the divine. Here, in this hallowed and sacred space, we are invited to allow ourselves to truly feel, to openly question, and to deeply explore. Every subtle whisper of the wind, every faint, distant sound contributes to this unique journey of discovery, where past and present seamlessly intertwine in a single eternal moment. In this profound silence, the wisdom of the ancients seems to manifest itself. The stories of the Nephilim are echoes of a truth that, though distant, still resonates within our souls. In the end, the question persists.
Who are we, if not a reflection of the ancient myths that have shaped our civilizations and our understanding of the world? In this valley, beneath the stars, the search for answers becomes a journey not only of discovery, but also of acceptance. Thus, as we allow ourselves to be carried away by this captivating narrative, we take a deep breath and let the questions arise. Images dance in the mind as sleep begins to envelop us, like a soft cloak. We let curiosity guide us as we surrender to the mystery and magic of the Nephilim, these beings who remind us of the power of stories and the eternal quest for knowledge. Our narrator, whose soft voice resonates in the darkness, invites us to ponder the implication of this union. What do the Nephilim represent in the broader context of human history? The mixture of divine and human suggests access to the unknown, an experience that makes us question the limits of our own essence. In the verses of Genesis, the narrative not only presents us with the origin of the Nephilim, but also confronts us with a moral dilemma. The pursuit of power and knowledge can lead us down dark paths. In antiquity, the presence of the Nephilim echoed across various civilizations. The ancient Sumerians, for example, spoke of the Anunnaki, divine beings who descended to Earth and interacted with humans. The connection between these beings and the Nephilim leads us to reflect on the universality of myth. What we have here is a narrative that extends across cultures, creating a web of meanings that, even in their diversity, share common themes: the quest for divinity, the struggle for control, and the consequences that arise from that pursuit. As we navigate this universe of stories, we are drawn to the figure of Enoch, an intriguing character who appears in apocryphal texts. The Book of Enoch, which was not included in the canonical scriptures, offers a more detailed insight into the Nephilim and their origins. Enoch, described as a man who walked with God, had visions and revelations about the destiny of the giants. The text speaks of the Watchers, who were fallen angels that descended to earth, took human wives, and taught humanity various branches of knowledge and skills, from metallurgy to sorcery. This transmission of knowledge and skills raises another question: to what extent is knowledge beneficial, and to what extent does it become a curse? Knowledge from metallurgy to sorcery.
This transmission of knowledge and skills raises another question: to what extent is knowledge beneficial, and at what point does it become a curse? In the Book of Enoch, the consequences of the interaction between the Watchers and humans resulted in a society marked by corruption and violence. The Nephilim, therefore, are not merely beings of great stature, but representations of the dualities that inhabit the human being: light and darkness, good and evil. This idea leads us to reflect on human nature itself, on how the desire to transcend our limitations can lead us down dangerous paths. The pursuit of power, in light of these accounts, is not just an exercise of ambition, but a complex dance between what is permitted and what is forbidden. The story tells that the earth became a place of great wickedness, and in response came the deluge, a form of purification. Here we see another aspect of the Nephilim narrative: the necessity of judgment. The deluge was not merely a catastrophic event, but a deliberate and sacred action to restore order to a corrupted world. This vision of a God who observes and eventually acts against human corruption is a powerful idea that resonates in many religious traditions. It reminds us that every action has its consequences, and that, often, what is seen as an act of justice can also be understood as a manifestation of love. However, the story of the Nephilim does not end with the deluge. There are mentions of giants who survived, such as the Anakim and Goliath, who emerged after this event. This leads us to question whether human nature is destined to repeat the same mistakes, or if we have the capacity to learn and evolve from our experiences. The resilience of the Nephilim suggests that, even in the face of judgment, the essence of what they represent continues to exist. As we move forward, we are confronted with Mount Hermon, a place that carries an immense symbolic and historical weight. This mountain, with its majestic altitudes and rich history, serves as a physical reminder of the connection between the celestial and the terrestrial. The megalithic ruins found on its summit speak of a time when humans sought to approach the divine, constructing structures that were both sacred and functional.
Mount Hermon, located on the border between Lebanon and Syria, is frequently seen as a place where divine and human lineages intertwine, a meeting point for the Watchers.
This space invites us to ponder the relationship between the sacred and the profane. What do the structures we erect say about our search for meaning? The desire to touch the sky, personified in pyramids, temples, and monuments, is evidence that humanity has always sought to transcend its limitations, even if this quest comes with risks and repercussions. An additional layer to this discussion is the influence these accounts have on cultures throughout history. The Nephilim and their legends are not mere stories. They have shaped myths, influenced religions, and left an indelible mark on our collective psyche. The idea of immense beings who can be both protectors and oppressors echoes throughout literature and art, reflecting our greatest hopes and fears. Each new generation that hears the story of the Nephilim adds its own interpretation, perpetuating the cycle of curiosity and fascination. As night deepens, the atmosphere becomes denser with the unresolved questions these accounts bring. What do we know about ourselves? And how far can we go in our quest for knowledge and power? The story of the Nephilim is therefore a mirror that reflects not only the nature of giants, but also the complexity and beauty of the human condition. Every interaction, every choice, and every consequence form the tapestry of our history, woven with threads of light and shadow, challenging us to confront our deepest truths. As the gentle breeze continues to blow through the valley, it becomes clear that the narrative of the Nephilim is not a story of the past, but rather an invitation to reflect on the present. The lessons we learn from these giants can still guide us on our journey, reminding us that, regardless of how high we may aim, true power resides in our capacity for choice and our responsibility towards the world around us. The story of the Nephilim evokes a series of profound questions that lead us to reflect on the essence of humanity and its connection to the divine. Ancient accounts tell us of grandiose beings who, according to some traditions, inhabited the earth before the Great Flood. These figures, often described as giants, are surrounded by mystery and reverence. What would happen if, in exploring these narratives, we found more than just stories? What if, instead, we discovered reflections on the human condition, its struggles and aspirations? Imagine for a moment an ancient landscape where mountains rose like silent sentinels, witnessing the passage of time. The rising sun cast its golden rays over a lush valley, full of life and mysteries. In this setting, the Nephilim could have been more than just immense creatures. They could symbolize a yearning for transcendence, for rising above everyday limitations. Would they then be a reflection of the ambitions of a humanity that sought to connect with something greater, something that challenged the very essence of existence? The narrative of the Nephilim, as presented in Genesis, offers us an intriguing perspective. The sons of God, who took the daughters of men, may represent the intersection between the divine and the earthly, between the celestial and the human. This leads us to question, what does this union truly mean? This alliance between worlds might have been an attempt to create a new order, a new form of life that transcended the limitations of what we know. By considering this, we are led to explore what it means to be human, the fragility of our condition, and the constant search for a greater purpose. As the shadows of night approach and the stars begin to shine brightly, we are enveloped by a sense of contemplation. The story of the Nephilim, far from being merely a cautionary tale, can be seen as a reflection on our own challenges and triumphs. These beings, with their superhuman strength, could be a metaphor for the desires that dwell in our hearts, the pursuit of power, recognition, and immortality. Through them, we realize that these aspirations continue to echo in our modern lives, even if in different forms. It is fascinating how narratives about the Nephilim are not exclusive to a single culture. Around the world, we find myths that speak of giants and powerful beings. In Greek mythology, for instance, the Titans, who also represented a challenge to the established order, show us that the conflict between the human and the divine is a recurring theme. This invites us to ponder the universality of stories and how, in different times and places, humanity attempts to understand its own existence.
If the Nephilim are an echo of the past, then perhaps they are also an invitation to reflect on our future. At the same time, the idea that the Nephilim were seen as the fallen suggests a fall from grace, a loss of something essential. This notion resonates with the human experience of failures and regrets. Often, we feel that we are a reflection of the decisions we make, and their consequences can lead us to a place of shadows and uncertainties. The story of the Nephilim, therefore, serves as a warning, but also as a promise of renewal. Just as they faced their own downfall, we too have the capacity to rise again, to learn from our experiences, and to seek a new path. In moments of tranquility, as the mind quiets, we are invited to explore the emotional dimension of these stories. What do the Nephilim teach us about the pursuit of acceptance? The desire to be loved and recognized is a timeless struggle. These giants, despite their strength, might have carried the weight of loneliness, alienation, and fear. In search of belonging, we often become prisoners of our own ambitions. This duality between strength and vulnerability is an intrinsic characteristic of the human experience. The valley around us seems to whisper these truths. The trees, with their leaves rustling in the wind, remind us that everything in life is interconnected. Just like the Nephilim, we too are part of a larger tapestry, where each thread, each story, intertwines into a universal narrative. This understanding invites us to embrace the complexity of life, to accept our fears and insecurities. After all, the human journey is full of highs and lows, and each of us carries a part of the Nephilim's legacy. As night advances, the serenity of this valley offers us a safe space for deep reflections. The idea that the Nephilim may have represented not only a powerful force, but also a call to responsibility resonates in our hearts. When we seek power or control, we must remember the consequences of our actions. The Nephilim challenge us to consider how we use our strength and influence. Will our ambitions be guided by wisdom, or are we destined to repeat the errors of the past? The story of the Nephilim invites us to look within ourselves, to confront our fears, and to cultivate a sense of responsibility for our choices. Through this reflection, we find a path to transformation. Thus, even amidst the shadows, the light of understanding can shine, guiding us on our journey. By allowing the echoes of the past to shape our present, we can aspire to create a future where strength is not merely measured by power, but by compassion and connection. Lesson on our journey. By letting the echoes of the past shape our present, we can aspire to create a future where strength is not only measured by power, but by compassion and connection. Thus, as night deepens and serenity envelops this valley, we are reminded that the story of the Nephilim is not just a narrative from a distant past, but a continuous reflection on what it means to be human. We invite ourselves to open our hearts and minds to the possibility that, like them, we have the capacity to grow, learn, and above all, transform ourselves. The journey is long, but every step counts. And as we gaze at the stars, we can find the courage to embrace both our challenges and our victories. The Nephilim, therefore, are not merely beings of great stature or strength, but the personification of a corruption that infiltrates the hearts and minds of men. Through the accounts, we can see how the passage of time does not diminish the gravity of their actions. The violence and impiety that arose from the union between the Watchers and the daughters of men created an echo that reverberates to this day. The story of the Nephilim is not merely a chronicle of giants. It is a story of morality, of choices made, and of the consequences that stem from them. The description of the Nephilim in the Book of Enoch is rich in detail. They are presented as giants, men of renown, whose actions brought disgrace upon the earth. The narrative leads us to reflect on the nature of power and knowledge. When divine beings descend and mix with humans, what does that mean for humanity? The mingling of the divine and the mortal not only alters the very essence of human beings, but can also trigger a series of events beyond anyone's control. In the sacred texts, the figure of Enoch emerges as a voice of warning, a mediator between men and the divine.
He observes the moral deterioration of society and the spreading corruption, and his visions reveal the inevitable fate of all who stray from the sacred path. The Book of Enoch details the punishment of the Watchers, who, by disobeying divine commandments, bring devastating wrath upon themselves and humanity. This narrative presents us with a clear view that knowledge, though powerful, must be handled with responsibility, as its misuse can lead to ruin.
In this context, the sacred mountain, Mount Hermon, becomes a crucial symbol. It is there that the Watchers made a pact of disobedience, and the choice of location is not random. The altitude and isolation of Hermon reflect the attempt to distance themselves from the consequences of their actions. The grandeur of the mountain, rising imposingly on the border between Lebanon and Syria, can be seen as a metaphor for the height of the ambitions and desires that led the Watchers to cross the line between the sacred and the profane. Those who descended from heaven sought not only pleasure, but also power and control over creation. What the Nephilim represent, therefore, is not just a physical anomaly, but an idea that manifests in different cultures and mythologies. The presence of similar beings, such as the Anunnaki in Sumerian tradition, suggests that the search for divinity and knowledge is a constant in human experience. These beings, who also interacted with humanity, raise questions about the responsibility that comes with wisdom. When we look at history, we see that each civilization has its own versions of these beings, reflecting the fears and aspirations of its peoples. As we delve deeper, we find echoes of this story in other accounts, such as that of Gilgamesh, a king who, in his quest for immortality, ultimately confronts the very fragility of the human condition. Gilgamesh, much like the Nephilim, is a giant, not just in stature, but in ambition. He seeks to transcend the limits imposed by mortality, and this quest leads him on a journey of self-knowledge and, at the same time, destruction. What we can learn from these myths is that the struggle between ambition and morality is a battle that defines the trajectory of humanity. Returning to the visions of Enoch, he not only observes the corruption around him, but also acts as an agent of change. His revelations about the fate of the Watchers and the Nephilim are a way to warn mankind about the dangers of disobedience and the loss of connection with the divine. Enoch becomes a model of devotion and morality, a reminder that true power resides in the ability to choose the right path, even in the face of the temptation of knowledge.
The consequences of the union between the Watchers and the daughters of men are not limited to one era or one culture. They echo through the centuries, reflecting in contemporary struggles for power, control, and knowledge. In each generation, the story of the Nephilim serves as a warning about the dangers of being swayed by unrestrained ambition and moral corruption. What does this tell us about the present? What can we learn from the errors of the past? As we delve deeper into this narrative, we are confronted with questions that challenge our own conceptions of ethics and morality. The pursuit of power and wisdom can lead us down dark paths, and the story of the Nephilim reminds us that knowledge, however alluring, must be approached with caution. The convergence of the divine and the human teaches us that we are, indeed, responsible for our choices. Ultimately, the story of the Nephilim is a narrative of duality, the struggle between light and darkness, the sacred and the profane, knowledge and ignorance. As we reflect on these themes, we are invited to consider our own lives and the choices we make. Will we be guided by a desire for power, or will we seek a path of understanding and balance? The lessons of the past, through the Nephilim and their consequences, continue to reverberate, reminding us that true greatness resides not in physical strength, but in the wisdom of our decisions. The story of the Nephilim, as narrated in Genesis, brings to light an enigma that spans millennia. The sons of God and the daughters of men form a narrative that sparks our imagination and our need to understand the complexity of life. Throughout history, these gigantic beings have been interpreted in various ways, reflecting the beliefs and fears of each era. What do we truly know about them? Were they figures of grandeur, monsters, or a mix of both? For many, the Nephilim represent more than just an account from the past. They are a symbol of what happens when the boundaries between the human and the divine become blurred. Ou uma mistura de ambos. Para muitos, os Nephilim representam mais do que apenas relato do passado. São símbolo do que acontece quando as fronteiras entre o humano e o divino se tornam turvas. On a quiet night, atop a hill, we sat together, watching the starry sky stretch above us like an infinite cloak. The gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers to us, while the full moon illuminated the path before us.
It was a perfect moment to reflect on the stories that shape us. The narratives of the Nephilim evoke images of beings who were not only giants in stature, but also in impact, leaving indelible marks on the traditions and cultures that succeeded them. The Nephilim are mentioned in Genesis 6, 1-4, where the passage indicates they were the giants of the earth. Such descriptions often lead us to think of imposing physical beings, but what if their true significance lies not in height, but in the symbolism they carry? These beings might represent human ambition, the pursuit of unchecked power and knowledge, which can lead to catastrophic consequences. The story then warns us about limits not to be overstepped. As the night winds blew gently, shadows lengthened around us. The darkness seemed to bring a sense of mystery and introspection. What attracts us to the Nephilim? The fear of the unknown, or a fascination with what could be? In truth, searching for answers about their existence reflects on ourselves, on our weaknesses and hopes. In a world where logic often prevails, stories of extraordinary beings and supernatural events remind us that more exists between heaven and earth than we can comprehend. Ancient accounts, such as those found in the Book of Enoch, further expand on the Nephilim. This apocryphal text describes the Watchers, angels who descended to earth, uniting with human women to create a new race. This narrative suggests an intersection between the sacred and profane, between the divine and human. If we accept this, we question our own nature. To what extent are we governed by external forces, and to what extent are we architects of our own lives? As the minutes passed, the temperature began to drop, and the coolness intensified. I leaned a little closer to the softly crackling fire before us, watching its flames dance as reflections of a forgotten past. It was easy to imagine how, in ancient times, people gathered around bonfires telling stories of gods and mythical creatures, seeking to understand their existence through these narratives. The Nephilim, grand and mysterious, would have been protagonists in many such tales, representing both ambition and downfall. Their stories teach us that misused power leads to destruction, a recurring theme across cultures. The Nephilim thus warn humanity what happens when ethical and moral boundaries are overstepped. In an era of constant scientific and technological advancement, we should recall these lessons from the past. The pursuit of knowledge must balance responsibility and ethics. What are we willing to sacrifice for progress? Perhaps we should remember these lessons from the past. The pursuit of knowledge must always be balanced with responsibility and ethics. What are we willing to sacrifice in the name of progress? And so, as we pondered these questions, the calm of the night enveloped us. The sound of leaves rustling in the wind and the distant call of a night bird created a natural symphony that connected us to the earth and the sky. The presence of the Nephilim, through the stories bequeathed to us, invites us to reflect on our own inner giants. What ambitions drive us, and at what cost do we seek to achieve them? The narratives of the Nephilim can serve as a metaphor for our daily struggles. Each of us possesses giants that we face in our lives, challenges that seem insurmountable. However, much like the myths surrounding these beings, we also have the capacity to rewrite our stories. With courage and resilience, we can transform our struggles into victories, overcoming the limitations imposed upon us. The night advanced, and the stars shone brightly, as if eager to share ancient secrets with us. The moonlight reflected on the ground, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced as the breeze passed. It was a moment of contemplation and connection. As thoughts settled, a feeling of gratitude washed over me. The Nephilim, with all their mystery, remind us that, regardless of our struggles,
we are part of a much larger narrative. As the sun began to prepare for dawn and the first lights of day started to color the sky, the night's calm transformed into anticipation. The story of the Nephilim, much like our own journey, continues to unfold, full of possibilities. And, like the ancients, we too have the power to shape our destiny. Reflection makes us more conscious, and consciousness, in turn, propels us towards the future. It is in this intertwining of stories and experiences that we find the essence of humanity, always in search of meaning and connection. Spread over the landscape serves as a protective mantle for those who gather there, but also as a sign that greatness can be accompanied by a tragic fall. Mount Hermon's altitude, reaching 2,814 meters, not only makes it a geographical landmark, but also a place steeped in symbolism.
It is in this sacred space, where sky touches earth, that the Watchers make their pact, defying established limits. Accounts of the Nephilim and their origin intertwine with stories from various cultures, where the presence of semi-divine or extraordinary beings is a constant. These beings, often described as giants or powerful, are frequently associated with catastrophes and disorder. What can we learn from these narratives? They speak to us about the dangers of exceeding limits imposed by divinity, of how knowledge and power, when not guided by morality, can lead to destruction. The Nephilim, with their immense size and supernatural abilities, are not merely an isolated phenomenon. They represent a rupture in the natural order. The alliance between the Watchers and the Daughters of Men brings forth questions about the nature of humanity and what it means to be truly human. It is a reflection on the duality of existence, where the sacred and the profane collide. Through this union, the line between good and evil becomes blurred, resulting in an era of violence and corruption. The Book of Enoch offers us a detailed version of this context, where the Watchers, through their knowledge, teach skills that alter society. Military metallurgy, for example, transformed warfare and violence into a common practice. What was once merely a struggle for survival now became a quest for power and control. The introduction of enchantments, astrology, and occult knowledge also reveals how dangerous the pursuit of knowledge can be. This pursuit, which could have been a source of evolution, becomes a path to moral degradation. The Nephilim are also described as men of renown, heroes of their eras, who gained fame and power. However, this fame came with a high price. History teaches that greatness, when not accompanied by responsibility, can turn into tragedy. Enoch, as an astute observer, warns us about this transition. He perceives that instead of drawing closer to divine values, humanity drifts away, immersed in its ambitions and selfish desires. The biblical narrative emphasizes the idea that knowledge must be treated with respect. The Watchers, by descending and sharing their wisdom, not only open doors to new understandings, but also to corruption. What appeared to be a gift became a curse. God's wrath, portrayed with such intensity, is a reaction to the transgression of these beings. The punishment fell not only upon them, but upon all of humanity, which allowed itself to be led astray by the allure of power. Mount Hermon, as a space where these pacts were formed, serves as a reminder that our choices have consequences. The megalithic ruins found on its summit are silent testimonies of a time when the divine and the human were intertwined in incomprehensible ways. These enormous structures, which defy contemporary logic, speak of lost knowledge, a time when the rules of our world were different. Hermon's height illustrates how ambition can make someone feel above natural laws. The Watchers, in their desire to interact with humanity, did not realize they were crossing dangerous lines. The mountain's altitude can also be seen as a metaphor for their self-perception. By positioning themselves above humanity, they believed they could dominate destiny, not only of men, but of the universe itself. And so, the story of the Nephilim unfolds as an endless cycle of ascent and fall. While they reach great heights, their downfall is equally significant. Enoch's account serves as a warning that, although we may seek the extraordinary, morality and ethics must always guide our choices. The narrative of the Nephilim is not a story of mere giants, but a reflection on what happens when humanity forgets its roots and ignores ancestral wisdom. Even today, the lessons of this ancient era echo in our society. Stories of power, corruption, and their consequences are present in every corner of civilization. The Nephilim teach us that true greatness lies not in personal achievements, but in the ability to remain faithful to the principles governing morality and ethics. Each of these narratives, each of these encounters with the supernatural, is not just a reminder of the past, but a call to action so that we do not repeat the same mistakes. Morality and ethics. Each of these narratives, each of these encounters with the supernatural, is not just a reminder of the past, but a call to action so that we do not repeat the same mistakes. Therefore, as we look at the history of the Nephilim, we are invited to reflect on ourselves and our choices. Greatness is not just about power and knowledge, but about our commitment to cultivating a society that values goodness and justice. As the narrative progresses, we follow the journey of Enoch and his struggle against corruption, always searching for a path that leads us back to what is sacred and true. The history of the Nephilim, therefore, does not end with tragedy, but transforms into a call to responsibility. The lessons we can learn from these beings, their actions, and their consequences are eternal and relevant. May we, then, look at these stories not merely as anecdotes from the past, but as guides that direct us in our own time, helping us find the balance between power and responsibility, between knowledge and morality. The story of the Nephilim is like a distant echo, a reverberation that crosses centuries and invites us to explore what is hidden in the shadows. As we delve deeper into this narrative, we find fragments of ancient texts that speak of beings who, according to traditions, possessed extraordinary characteristics. Genesis 6, 1-4 presents us with the intriguing image of the sons of God, who united with the daughters of men, resulting in the creation of the Nephilim, described as giants who inhabited the earth. But who were these beings, and what was their purpose in this ancestral plot? As night advances, our gaze turns to the stars. Each bright point in the sky seems to hold a story, a mystery waiting to be unveiled. The Nephilim, like the stars, can be seen from different angles, depending on the context in which we find ourselves. Some view them as divine beings, others as monsters, and there are still those who interpret them as figures representing the excesses of humanity. It is this multiplicity of interpretations that makes the story of the Nephilim so fascinating and complex. As we reflect on these beings, we also encounter the Book of Enoch, an apocryphal text that expands the Genesis narrative. Here, the story gains new layers. It is said that 200 watchers descended to Mount Hermon, making a covenant under a curse. These watchers were celestial beings who, by uniting with human women, brought to earth not only the Nephilim, but also vast knowledge. Semyaza, Azazel, and other leaders of these watchers imparted wisdom about metallurgy, sorcery, and even astrology. However, this knowledge brought with it disastrous consequences. Violence, corruption, and impiety spread throughout humanity, resulting in a cataclysm that would change the course of history. Mount Hermon, with its majestic altitude of 2,814 meters, becomes an emblematic setting for this narrative. Its location, on the border between Lebanon and Syria, evokes a feeling of sacredness and prohibition, as if the very land were guarding ancient secrets. Its proximity to Baalbek, just 40 kilometers away, adds an additional dimension to this story. Baalbek is known for its megalithic ruins, which cast doubt on the ancients' ability to erect such monumental structures. Like the Nephilim, these stones seem to defy modern logic and understanding, leading us to question the true nature of the civilization that built them. About such monumental structures, like the Nephilim, these stones seem to defy modern logic and understanding, leading us to question the true nature of the civilization that built them. As we journey through this narrative, we are led to reflect on the meaning of the flood, which is described as a response to this widespread corruption. The idea of divine judgment resonates in many cultures, but the story of the Nephilim presents us with a unique perspective. The flood was not just a cataclysmic event. It was an attempt to cleanse the earth of its impurity, a new beginning that paradoxically preserved some of the Nephilim who continued to exist after the waters receded. The account mentions that, even after the flood, giants like Og and the Anakim still walked among men, suggesting that the struggle between the human and the divine, good and evil, was far from over. Sitting under the starry canopy, we are reminded that the story of the Nephilim is ultimately a reflection on the human condition. Just like the Watchers who overstepped boundaries, we often find ourselves seeking power and knowledge that can lead us to unexpected consequences. The narrative urges us to consider the risks of excessive ambition and the importance of recognizing the limits we should not cross. It is a subtle warning, a lesson that resonates through time and remains relevant in our own days. Shadows dance around us, and the tranquility of the night offers us a space to contemplate what we truly know about the Nephilim. What did the men and women of past eras understand about these beings? Were they creatures of a distant age, or simply projections of our fears and aspirations? The line between the real and the mythical is often thin, and perhaps it is this ambiguity that captivates us so much.
Once again, we look up at the stars, and the immensity of the cosmos seems to embrace us, as if inviting us to explore not only what lies beyond, but also what resides within us. The Nephilim, with their grandeur and mystery, challenge us to confront the depths of our own existence. Amidst life's complexity, we find unexpected connections, stories that intertwine, and memories that echo through time. As the night progresses, the gentle breeze continues to caress our faces, bringing with it the fragrance of damp earth and the distant sound of rustling leaves. It is in this serene environment that we begin to unravel the layers of our own history, just as the narrative of the Nephilim unfolds across millennia of interpretation and reflection. What unites us is curiosity, the search for answers that may never come, but which propel us forward, to question and to dream. The Nephilim, with their ambiguous nature, offer us not just a tale of the past, but a metaphor for our own journey. As we conclude this reflection beneath the starry sky, we are reminded that, regardless of how we interpret these ancient beings, the true magic lies in the ability to dream, to imagine, and to explore the mysteries that life presents to us. Therefore, let this story continue to guide us, to inspire us, even as we rest beneath the soft moonlight, ready to surrender to sleep, enveloped by a narrative that will never fade. With this, the shadows deepen, and the serenity of the night envelops us, inviting us to relax, to let our thoughts dissipate like clouds, as we sink into a peaceful slumber, under the protection of the eternal mysteries that surround us. The Book of Enoch presents a detailed version of this context, where the Watchers, through their knowledge, teach skills that alter society. Military metallurgy, for example, transformed warfare and violence into a common practice. What was once merely a struggle for survival now became a quest for power and control. The introduction of incantations, astrology, and occult knowledge also reveals how dangerous the pursuit of wisdom can be. This search, which could have been a source of evolution, becomes a portal to decadence, paving the way for corruption and impiety. With this, the shadows deepen, and the serenity of the night envelops us, inviting us to relax, to let our thoughts dissipate like clouds, as we sink into a peaceful slumber, under the protection of the eternal mysteries that surround us. The Book of Enoch presents a detailed version of this context, where the Watchers, through their knowledge, teach skills that alter society. Military metallurgy, for example, transformed warfare and violence into a common practice. What was once merely a struggle for survival now became a quest for power and control. The introduction of incantations, astrology, and occult knowledge also reveals how dangerous the pursuit of wisdom can be. This search, which could have been a source of evolution, becomes a portal to decadence, paving the way for corruption and impiety.
Among the leaders of the Watchers, Semyaza, Azazel, and Barakel stand out. Semyaza, the most influential, is described as the one who led the rebellion, leading his companions to descend to earth and to take the daughters of men as wives. Azazel, in turn, is responsible for teaching the arts of war, introducing weapons and techniques that transformed violence into an everyday aspect of human life. The Book of Enoch describes how these teachings culminated in a time of great perversity, where violence and corruption became the norm. The alliance between the Watchers and the daughters of men was no simple union. It generated an offspring that altered the course of history, the Nephilim, who were known as the Fallen. These beings, described as giants, brought with them a capacity for destruction that seemed uncontrollable. With their immense physical stature and supernatural abilities, they became figures both feared and revered. The combination of celestial blood with humanity resulted in a race that transcended normal limits, and their actions left an indelible mark on the earth. The presence of the Nephilim created a profound division among humans. Those who opposed them, resentful of the tyranny and violence that permeated their lives, began to clamor for justice. Stories about what these giants accomplished spread, and the memory of their deeds became a warning. The corruption that emerged from their presence not only affected communities, but also relationships among humans themselves, turning friendships into rivalries and alliances into wars. Over time, the greatness of the Nephilim became a legend, a distant echo of a past that seemed to have been forgotten. Yet their marks remained. Accounts of their existence persisted, shaping myths and traditions in various cultures. Stories about giants who walked among men, possessing extraordinary abilities, resonated in narratives worldwide, creating a pattern that could not be ignored. Many ancient civilizations mentioned powerful beings who descended from the heavens, suggesting that the idea of the Nephilim was not exclusive to a single tradition, but a truth shared by many. The relationship between the Nephilim and natural calamities is also a recurring theme. Many narratives speak of how their presence brought torrential rains, floods, and disasters. These catastrophes were seen as signs that nature was in disharmony, reflecting the state of corruption and disorder that had taken root in society. The deluge, which became one of the most significant events in the histories of various cultures, is frequently associated with the need for purification, an attempt to restore order to a world filled with chaos generated by the Nephilim and their progenitors. In the stories of various cultures, it is often associated with the need for purification, an attempt to restore order in a world filled with chaos generated by the Nephilim and their progenitors. After the flood, the story of the Nephilim does not end. The phrase, "and also after," found in Genesis 6:4, suggests that even after the destruction of corrupt humanity, something of the Nephilim's legacy persisted. The Anakim, mentioned in the scriptures, are considered descendants or remnants of this lineage. The idea that giants continued to exist after this catastrophic event raises questions about the nature of corruption and the possibility that the Watcher's lineage could perpetuate itself, even in a destroyed world. This continuity of the Nephilim's presence leads us to question the morality and ethics of the pursuit of knowledge. What did these beings bring to the world? Did they represent evolution or decadence? In one sense, they pioneered the introduction of skills that could have uplifted humanity. However, the way these abilities were used revealed the darker side of human nature, where power became an end in itself, leading to domination and suffering. As we explore the history of the Nephilim, the question persists: what is our role in this legacy? What can we learn from the rise and fall of this lineage that, even at its zenith, brought destruction? Wisdom lies in recognizing that the pursuit of knowledge must be accompanied by responsibility and morality. What the Watchers and their descendants teach us is that power is not inherently good or evil, but what truly matters is how we choose to use it. Finally, the narrative of the Nephilim serves as a mirror for our own lives and societies. Just as the Watchers defied natural laws, we are often tempted to cross boundaries that can lead to our own ruin. History reminds us of the importance of respecting the natural order and the dangers that arise when we ignore the signs and are carried away by our ambitions. It is an invitation to reflect on knowledge, power, and the consequences of our actions, not only in our individual lives, but also as part of a larger community.
The journey of the Nephilim, therefore, is a warning that resonates through time, urging us to ponder what it truly means to be human in a world where the sacred and the profane frequently intertwine. Mount Hermon, with its majestic altitude of 2,814 meters, becomes an emblematic setting for this narrative. Its location, on the border between Lebanon and Syria, is marked by a cerulean glow that, at dusk, reflects the light of the sun as it bids farewell to the horizon. The slopes covered with dense vegetation and ancient rocks that have witnessed centuries of history seem to whisper secrets of immemorial times. The atmosphere is imbued with fresh, pure air, interspersed with the scent of damp earth after a light rain, as if the mountain itself were alive, guarding the memories of the Watcher's Passage. These 200 Watchers, who descended in search of a forbidden connection, found a world that was transforming. They brought with them not only a supernatural beauty, but also vast knowledge, capable of shaping reality around them. Semyaza, the leader, was the most notable among them, known for his wisdom. Others, like Azazel and Armaras, were also influential, each contributing their own sphere of knowledge. Military metallurgy, incantations, astrology, and the secrets of the cosmos were shared among men, creating a bridge between the celestial and the terrestrial. As days passed, the union of the Watchers with the daughters of men resulted in greater stature and physical strength. The Nephilim, the giants, became the embodiment of humanity's dreams and nightmares. They were charismatic beings, endowed with exceptional abilities, but also feared. Narratives spoke of their greatness and the terror they inspired, like gods among mortals. However, this new era of power did not come without a price. The wisdom of the Watchers, what initially seemed a blessing, soon became a burden. Corruption spread like wildfire in a dry field. Humanity, seduced by knowledge and power, began to stray from the paths of morality. Violence and ungodliness became common, and communities that were once united began to divide. What was a gift transformed into a curse. Men, now armed with techniques of war and sorcery, did not hesitate to use their new knowledge to dominate one another. The Nephilim, meant to be humanity's protectors, became its oppressors. When the harmony between the human and the divine was broken, the world's cry reached the heavens. A decision was made, a response to the chaos that had settled on earth. The deluge, like a storm of justice, was sent to purge the corruption engulfing creation. The waters rose, taking not only the Nephilim, but also those who, in their ambition, forgot their sacred duties. The story of the deluge became a turning point, the line between civilization and anarchy. But even after the deluge, the story of the Nephilim did not end. The text of Genesis says they were not merely a fleeting phase. The assertion that, also afterward, giants existed on Earth suggests that the consequences of the union between the Watchers and human women endured. The Anakim and Goliath, mentioned in later narratives, are witnesses to this dark reality. They carried the heritage of the Nephilim, showing that, despite the purge, the shadow of the past still haunted humanity. Mount Hermon, once a Watcher's place of descent, now becomes a symbol of a lost era. The megalithic ruins on its slopes speak of a time when extraordinary beings walked among mortals. The stones, large and imposing, seem to tell tales of battles and alliances, of loves and betrayals. The legends surrounding the mountain are numerous, but all converge on one point. The pursuit of knowledge can lead to salvation, but it can also result in destruction. As night advances, the sky fills with stars that seem to shine with a particular intensity. Each luminous point carries the possibility of ancient secrets. The connection between the Nephilim and the constellations is a tenuous line, leading us to question if they still inhabit the cosmos. The stories of giants who challenged the gods may not be so distant.
Through the lens of the past, we can ask ourselves if these mythical figures can teach us about ourselves, the limits we must respect, and the consequences of our choices. Through the lens of the past, we might ask ourselves if these mythical figures can teach us something about ourselves, about the limits we should respect, and the consequences of our choices. The echoes of the Nephilim story still resonate, and curiosity about their lives and legacies persists. What lessons can we draw from the combination of the human and the divine, of wisdom and boundless ambition?
As we look at the night sky, we can find inspiration in the constellations, in which the ancients saw not just stars, but also stories of gods and heroes. This connection between the past and the present allows us to reflect on our own lives, on the choices we make every day. Therefore, as we contemplate the mystery of the Nephilim, we are invited not only to understand what happened, but also to consider how these stories shape our understanding of the world. They remind us that power and knowledge must be handled with care and respect. The pursuit of truth and understanding is a path that must be trod with responsibility. After all, like the stars in the sky, the history of the Nephilim illuminates the way, but also warns us about the dangers that can arise from our own nature. The presence of the Nephilim generated a profound division among humans. Those who opposed them, resentful of the tyranny and violence that permeated their lives, began to cry out for justice. Stories about what these giants represented spread like wildfire, leading many to believe that the only solution to their suffering would be the eradication of their oppressors. Cities and villages, once peaceful, became battlegrounds where humans fought among themselves, divided by their feelings towards the Nephilim. Some saw them as gods, superior beings who could offer protection and power, while others considered them monsters whose existence threatened humanity itself. This polarization not only created social divisions, but also encouraged the emergence of resistance movements. Clandestine groups formed, seeking ways to fight against oppression. They were known as the Children of the Earth, and their objective was to restore order and peace in their communities. Legends about these giants and their feats began to be told around campfires. Stories about warriors who confronted the Nephilim and managed to defeat them became a symbol of hope. Poets and bards, who once sang of conquests and heroes, now dedicated themselves to narrating the deeds of ordinary men who, armed with courage and cunning, defied the fate that seemed already sealed. These narratives became a powerful instrument of resistance, uniting the oppressed around a common ideal. Meanwhile, the influence of the Watchers continued to spread. The skills they had taught humanity were not easily forgotten. Metallurgy, the use of enchantments, and astrology were infiltrating the daily practices of many. The quest for power and knowledge became increasingly seductive, attracting those who wished not only to survive, but also to prosper. The moral dilemma that presented itself was clear. How far would one be willing to go to achieve their goals? This pursuit of knowledge and power, inspired by the Watchers, often led to disastrous consequences. The question was clear. How far would one be willing to go to achieve their goals? This quest for knowledge and power, inspired by the Watchers, often led to disastrous consequences. The story of Azazel, one of the main Watchers, was especially revered, yet also feared. He was known for having offered humanity the arts of war and the tools for destruction. His legacy was a mix of grandeur and ruin. His teachings resulted in technological advancement, but also in the deterioration of human relationships. Wars began to spread, and with them, pain and suffering increased. The continuous presence of the Nephilim and the Watchers shaped society in ways few could fully comprehend. Fear and reverence coexisted, creating a palpable tension among humans. For many, the Nephilim were a constant reminder of the fragility of the human condition. The feeling of powerlessness before seemingly unshakable forces generated an absence of hope. Cities, now dominated by chaos, were a shadow of their former selves, and the surrounding nature reflected this desolation. Amidst this turmoil, a young man named Kael emerged as a symbol of resistance. He was not a warrior, but possessed a wisdom that set him apart from his peers. Kael began gathering followers who believed in a different approach. Instead of trying to defeat the Nephilim through force, he advocated for the pursuit of wisdom and peace. He believed the struggle against the giants should not be merely physical, but also spiritual. Kael began to preach that true power lay in understanding and unity, not in division and war. Kael's words began to echo among those weary of the struggle. Many people joined him, drawn by his optimistic vision of a future where peaceful coexistence was possible. This movement grew slowly, but its influence was expanding. Kael not only spoke of resistance, but also of the need to recover the knowledge that had been distorted by the Watchers. He proposed a path of reconciliation and learning, where humans could reinterpret the teachings they had received, seeking ways to use them for the common good.
The impact of Kael's ideas began to spread, creating a new dialogue among communities. Stories about the Nephilim and the Watchers were no longer told merely as tales of terror, but as lessons about the human condition and the responsibility that comes with power. People began to question their own actions and reflect on how they could contribute to building a better world. While Kael and his followers worked to promote peace, a new generation of leaders emerged. They were men and women who had experienced pain and suffering, but also hope. They were visionaries who sought to understand the nature of the Nephilim and the Watchers to find ways to coexist with these powerful beings. This new leadership was marked by a desire for learning and growth rather than vengeance and destruction. Time passed, and the struggle between humans and the Nephilim continued, but the narrative was changing. The idea that knowledge could be a tool for liberation began to take root. Communities, once fragmented, began to unite around a new understanding. Instead of seeing themselves as oppressed, they were becoming protagonists of their own stories, seeking a future where peace was a possibility. Kael, now recognized as a prominent figure among the leaders, continued to inspire those around him. His words resonated with power, and he increasingly became a symbol of hope in a world marked by fear. People began to believe that, despite the challenges, the possibility of a rebirth was within reach. The knowledge that was once a source of corruption could now be reimagined as a path to harmony. As night fell and the stars shone above, a new kind of story began to be written. Not a story of war and destruction, but one of understanding and empowerment. The journey of Kael and the Sons of Earth was just beginning, and the struggle for truth and understanding was still far from over. On the horizon, the promise of a new dawn emerged, a vision that united the past and the future in a single thread of hope. Corruption spread like wildfire in a dry field. Humanity, seduced by knowledge and power, began to stray from the paths of morality. Cities prospered under the influence of the Nephilim, but the essence of what it meant to be human was slowly lost.
People, now obsessed with their ambitions and desires, abandoned their beliefs and traditions. In the river valley, where a civilization flourished, the inhabitants began to adopt practices that were once considered sacred, but which were now distorted in the name of their own survival. Sacrifices, dark rituals, and an incessant quest for power became common. The voices that once reverberated in chants of gratitude to the gods were silenced by greed and the desire for dominion. In the surrounding mountains, the Watchers observed the transformation with a mixture of awe and concern. Those who had come to help now saw themselves as accomplices in a grim destiny. Semiyaza, distressed, gathered his companions in one of the hidden caves deep within Mount Hermon. The light filtered through the rock fissures, creating dancing shadows on the walls, reflecting the tension that permeated the air. "We cannot allow this to continue," he declared, his voice echoing in the cave. "We were sent to guide, but instead we brought destruction. Each day, the distance between humans and what we consider sacred grows." The other Watchers nodded, though the fear of their own power kept them immobilized. Azazel, one of the most audacious among them, replied, "Knowledge is a double-edged sword. We offered them the ability to shape their destiny, but they used it to destroy themselves. We cannot be held responsible for their choices." The discussion intensified. The moral dilemma they faced was as vast as the night sky observing them. Each of them had a different vision of what should be done.
While some clamored for direct intervention, others suggested they should withdraw and let humanity face the consequences of its actions. However, Semyaza knew that withdrawal was not an option. The pact made between them, the oath that they would always be present to guide, could not be ignored. We must find a way to restore balance. If we do nothing, humanity will head towards self-destruction, and that will tarnish our legacy. Their role was to guide, and it could not be ignored. We must find a way to restore balance. If we do nothing, humanity will lead itself to self-destruction, and that will stain our legacy. While discussions raged, the situation in the valley grew increasingly desperate. The Nephilim, once viewed as figures of worship, began to be feared. Humans, in their quest for power, started to believe they could control these supernatural forces.
The rituals intended to honor them transformed into attempts at domination. Nights became bleak, and the echo of prayers was replaced by the clamor of civil wars. Groups that once united in celebration now fought among themselves, vying for their own gods. The Nephilim, with their colossal statures and unimaginable powers, became objects of aversion. The faith that once united mortals now fractured, creating factions that opposed each other because of the Watchers' distorted teachings. The situation reached its apex when an ancient prophecy, which spoke of a great deluge as a form of purification, began to circulate among the people. The voices of shepherds and priests united in warnings, and soon many believed the apocalypse was approaching. The fear of final judgment caused humanity to turn against the Nephilim, blaming them for their downfall. In a moment of agonizing tension, a group of armed humans approached Mount Hermon, determined to confront the Watchers. They carried torches and metal weapons that gleamed under the moonlight. The atmosphere was charged, and the wind carried the foreboding that something terrible was about to happen. Semyaza and the other Watchers prepared for the confrontation. "We must show ourselves to them, not as gods, but as guides," suggested one of the younger Watchers, Marin. "If they fear us, perhaps we can use that to our advantage, to teach instead of destroy." Thus, the Watchers decided to reveal themselves, descending from the mount in all their glory. When they appeared, the humans fell silent, stunned by their imposing presence. The moonlight illuminated their magnificent figures, reflecting the beauty and terror they embodied. Semyaza raised his hand in a peaceful gesture. "We have not come to fight. We are here to help, but we need you to want that too." Murmurs began, anxious and uncertain. The passions that once moved them to worship now became a trap, making them question the Watchers' true intentions. "What do you want from us?" shouted one of the human leaders. "We want to restore what was lost," Semyaza replied, the tremendous responsibility of his words echoing. "We allowed ambition to blind you, but there is a way to return to the light. Together, we must face the approaching darkness." As tensions mounted, the future of humanity and the Watchers hung in the balance. The destiny unfolding before them could not only define their existences, but also shape the history that would be told for millennia.
The struggle between power and morality, between light and darkness, was about to reach an unexpected climax. And so, as the night deepened, the stars above seemed to shine with renewed intensity, as if they too anxiously awaited the outcome of this story that mingled mortals and immortals, gods and men, in a delicate dance between creation and destruction. The presence of the Nephilim brought forth profound questions about power, control, and morality. Legends of their deeds and misdeeds spread like tempestuous winds, instilling both fear and reverence. In every corner of the cities, their stories resonated among mortals. On the battlefields, however, the scene grew even more chaotic. The sons of Earth, driven by a fervent desire for justice, faced a sea of uncertainties. They formed clandestine groups determined to reclaim their lives and lands seized by these giants. Their meetings were held by torchlight in secret places, far from the eyes of the Watchers. The leaders' voices emerged, fervent and passionate. A man named Kael stood out among them. With a history marked by personal tragedies, his charisma drew people to him. He spoke of a future where humanity would no longer be subjugated, where legends of courage would be tangible realities, not mere tales. Kael articulated a strategy, a plan to deliberately weaken the Nephilim's influence over society. He knew they first needed to regain their people's trust, demonstrating their ability to fight and win. Campfires crackled as bards recounted tales of ancient warriors who faced the Nephilim. Each account was a sliver of hope, a spark to ignite men's hearts. The heroic deeds of a warrior named Miran, who challenged a Nephilim in combat, became a symbol of resistance. Songs of his bravery were chanted in every village, inspiring men to unite against their giant oppressors. Miran was not merely a name, he was an ideal. He represented humanity's capacity to resist and fight forces threatening its very existence. However, the journey to freedom was not simple. The power of the Nephilim was not limited to their physical strength. It extended to the knowledge shared with humanity. Many skills taught by these beings were deeply rooted in communities, from metallurgy to mystical enchantments.
The pursuit of this knowledge often became a seductive trap. Those who sought more knowledge of the arts bestowed by the Watchers often found themselves torn between the desire for power and its exacting cost. It was a moral dilemma tormenting humanity. The Sons of Earth, though determined to fight, also contended with the temptation to use teachings they deemed dangerous. Some argued that to win, they must master the Nephilim's practices. Others, however, warned that yielding to this temptation could lead to the very fate they feared. The line between good and evil grew increasingly blurred, as what was once considered just was now being questioned. Giving in to this temptation could lead to the same fate they had feared. The line between good and evil became increasingly blurred, while what was once considered just was now questioned. Amidst these tensions, the secret meetings continued. On a cold night, lit only by starlight, Kael and his followers gathered in a hidden valley, far from the inquisitive gaze and surveillance of the Nephilim. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the urgency of the moment hanging in the air. Kael raised his voice, his gaze firm and resolute. He made an appeal to the group, reminding them of what they were fighting for. We are here not just for ourselves, but for our children, for our future generations. We cannot allow the tyranny of the Nephilim to continue to dominate us. We need courage, not only in the fight, but in the choices we make. Kael's words resonated deeply among those present. A murmur of agreement spread, and soon everyone was uniting behind his call. However, the internal division permeating the group could not be ignored. Some voices rose, questioning the need for a direct confrontation. "We must be intelligent," said a woman named Thara, a shrewd and respected strategist among the Sons of Earth. "We can learn from the Nephilim, use their techniques against them, but we must never become like them. If we do that, we lose our essence." The heated debate that followed brought to light the complexity of the situation. The struggle against the Nephilim was not just physical, it was a battle for the soul of humanity. Many agreed that they needed to find a balance, a way to use knowledge without losing themselves in its shadow. It was a tense conversation, where every word carried the weight of decision, and what was at stake was more than just freedom. It was humanity itself.
As the weeks passed, the fervor of the meetings began to yield tangible results. The Sons of Earth began to organize, training each other in combat skills, but also in resistance strategies. The knowledge of metallurgy, which once seemed an unattainable gift of the Nephilim, became a tool in the hands of men. They began to forge weapons, not just to attack, but to defend what was theirs. The resistance gained strength. As the echo of battles resonated in the mountains, humans began to unite around a common purpose. Stories of initial victories, though small, spread like sparks in a wildfire. The feeling that they could face the Nephilim, that they were not alone, transformed into a wave of hope. This new determination lit a spark in the eyes of men and women who had previously been dominated by fear. The fight for freedom was just beginning, but now everyone felt that perhaps, just perhaps, victory was within reach.
The winds of change were blowing, and the story of the Nephilim was becoming not just a tale of oppression, but also a testament to human resilience, a call to action that would echo for generations. Each night, around their campfires, the sons of Earth shared their hopes, fears, and dreams. It was in the unity of their voices and the strength of their hearts that true magic resided. The legend of Mirren became a legacy, and the struggle against the Nephilim a journey that would transcend time, demonstrating that even in darkness, light could always find its way. This was the essence of humanity, the ability to fight, to dream, and never to give up, even in the face of the greatest adversity. V4. Even in darkness, light could always find its way. This was the essence of humanity, the capacity to fight, to dream, and never to give up, even in the face of the most immense adversity. Thus, the cycle of resistance and hope intertwined in the lives of the men and women who refused to bow before tyranny. The struggle was only just beginning, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance between knowledge and choice. The shadow of the Nephilim still loomed over them, but now, armed with courage and determination, they were ready to confront any challenge that came their way. The future was still uncertain, but the flame of hope burned brighter than ever. The moral dilemma the Watchers faced deep within the cave seemed amplified by the surrounding darkness. Light filtered through the fissures in the rocks, danced on the irregular surfaces, reflecting the confusion and uncertainty that dwelled in their hearts. The profound silence that followed the discussion only heightened the tension. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, awaiting a decision. Semyaza, the reluctant leader, felt the weight of his words on his shoulders. If we do not act now, what will become of the humanity we swore to protect? They are losing themselves in an abyss of corruption and decay. Our intervention might be the only hope to restore balance. But Marin, another of the Watchers, shook his head with sorrow. We are talking about beings who possess free will. Intervention could be seen as a form of control, a violation of their choices. If we take away their freedoms, we will be as guilty as they are. The discussion continued, each expressing their concerns with fervor, but with each proposal, the feeling of powerlessness grew. As night advanced, the moonlight that had once illuminated the cave now hid itself, as if the stars, too, were hesitant to shed light on the situation. The group was divided between the desire to rescue humanity and the awareness that their actions could have irreversible consequences. On an impulse, Azazel stood up, his eyes shining with determination. I can no longer stand by and watch this happen. If they can't see what they are becoming, perhaps we need to give them a push. The knowledge we possess is vast, and if they can't use it wisely, we must show them what is truly important. The other Watchers looked at him, some with admiration, others with fear. The idea of direct intervention resonated in their minds, but there was a tacit understanding that such an action could unleash a cycle of unforeseeable consequences. The power they possessed was immense, but it also represented a great risk. Azazel, you speak of pushing, but that could turn into a free-fall, said Thara, her voice soft but firm. We know what they are capable of with power. History has shown this countless times. We need to find a different path. She paused, observing the expressions of her companions. What if, instead of forcing a path, we guided them? What if we brought back what was lost, but in a way that respects their choices? What if we simply showed them the way back to what was sacred without forcing their hand? Hearing her words, a respectful silence fell upon the group.
The idea of guiding instead of controlling began to gain traction in the minds of the Watchers. They realized that despite the despair they felt, there was a possibility to restore the connection to traditions, to rekindle the hope that still remained hidden beneath layers of corruption and ambition. 4. They realized that despite their despair, there was a possibility to restore the connection with traditions, to rekindle the hope that still lay hidden beneath layers of corruption and ambition. If we can inspire them to rediscover what it means to live in harmony with the sacred, perhaps we can avert an even greater catastrophe, Semyaza said, with renewed determination in his voice. We need to find a way for them to see the beauty of what once was, so they can choose a better path for themselves. And so, the Watchers began to devise a plan that did not involve direct manipulation, but rather a subtle return to the forgotten fundamentals. The idea was simple, yet powerful: to awaken curiosity and reverence for the cycles of life, for nature, and for the ancient teachings that had fallen into disuse. They decided to disperse across different regions, each with the mission of planting the seeds of knowledge in the minds and hearts of humans in a way that would be easily assimilable. They would be shadows in their lives, subtle influences that would help them rediscover the lost path. Semyaza, Azazel, Thara, and Mere prepared for the journey that awaited them. With the first light of morning appearing on the horizon, the Watchers bid farewell, each carrying the hope of a future where humanity could once again live in harmony with the cosmos. The mission was risky, but a pulsating energy of determination and renewal filled the air. As each of them departed, the whispering voices of the river valley seemed to echo, as if the earth itself were grateful for the new approach the Watchers had chosen. The awakening of human consciousness was just beginning, and the journey to restore the balance between the sacred and the profane could finally be embarked upon. However, not everything would be simple. The corruption that had dominated the communities would not disappear easily. There were those who would oppose change, who wished to preserve the status quo and would continue to benefit from distorted practices. Therefore, the Watchers would also have to deal with the resistance and challenges that would arise along the way. As the sun rose, the valley began to awaken. The first lights of day revealed a vibrant world full of life. The inhabitants of the river valley, though still lost in their ambitions, began to feel a change in the air. A faint whisper of hope was forming, a promise that the cycle could be broken, that they could reclaim what had been lost. Thus, the Watchers embarked on their missions, each carrying not only the weight of their responsibility, but also the light of hope. They were the bearers of a new beginning, the connection between heaven and earth, the guardians of balance, ready to fight for what was just and sacred. And so, as the stars faded on the horizon and daylight emerged, the future of humanity remained open, a blank page awaiting the stories that would be written, the choices that would be made. The legacy of the Nephilim would be present, but now as a guide, an influence that could lead humanity to a new rebirth. The journey was far from over, but the light of dawn promised a path. More importantly, it promised the possibility of a new destiny, where the relationship between humans and gods could be re-established, where the sacred could return to everyday life, and where balance could finally be restored. Thus, the story of the Nephilim did not end, but transformed, evolving into a new narrative where every choice would count and every action would have an impact, not only on them, but on all generations to come. Hope, finally, was reborn.